Thanks everybody for joining me. Looks like, if I'm not wrong, it's just a little bit after in the afternoon for you. So hopefully you had a good lunch and all that. It's the evening for me. I'm in Portugal actually for another conference. So I'm here in the hotel room. So this is kind of exciting. Anyway, so yeah, and it's evening here. So welcome to the session at the KCD Colombia. And so this session is about, oops, my slides are delayed. There we go. This session is about progressive delivery with Istio and Argo rollouts. So it's just me today. So just Kevin, Alex was unfortunately not able to make it, but that's okay because, we can, I can do it all alone as well. So I'm Kevin Dubois, for those who weren't in the session yesterday with Tecton and Argo CD. So I'll introduce myself again. So I'm Kevin Dubois. I'm a developer advocate at Red Hat. My background is in mostly in software engineering and also a little bit of platform engineering. So I started working with deploying things straight to Linux servers. Then got into containers and Kubernetes and all that stuff. And so in that Red Hat we do a lot of cloud native deployments and everything. So yeah, I speak a few languages, but unfortunately not really Spanish. I can understand it a little bit, but unfortunately we will have to do the session in English. And if you want to keep up to date, you can follow me on Twitter or on Blue Sky even. I have a YouTube channel with some interesting videos, and so feel free to join. And then you can also get on my GitHub. I'll share the link to the repository that I'm using for my demo as well. So we'll get into the slides. So if you were again in the session yesterday, you probably saw this slide. For those who weren't, basically you have kind of this flow of how you develop an application, right? So you have your inner loop development where somebody's actually writing the code and or building applications in some way. They're maybe doing some testing and debugging ideally, and then at some point they'll push their code and ideally somebody might review it, or there's some process, and then you end up in the, let's call it the outer loop, where somebody might do code review, you'll do continuous integration, continuous delivery of some sort, maybe do some security checks, some compliance checks and everything. So that's the outer loop. And so that's what we're focusing on in this session. So we're not really focusing on the developer part in this session. So, so we're basically what we saw yesterday was CI, CD, right? The CI as a continuous integration where you're building your application and testing and doing some security checks and releasing your application, and then you'll deploy it to a staging and production at some point with continuous deployment and delivery. And the main difference between continuous delivery and deployment being that with continuous delivery, you have your deployment ready to be deployed, but you're not actually doing the deployment to production without like a manual step, right? And that's what's most common for companies, where they still want to have some control over when they're going to production. Some, let's say, very advanced or mature companies will actually do continuous deployment, where as soon as it gets your codes gets merged and goes through automatic processes and gets deployed automatically without there being a manual step. But of course, you need to make sure that everything is tested well and all that. But so that's CI/CD, and that's what we're focusing on today. So and this is kind of a typical scenario where the developers are working through the week, and at the end of the week they're ready. Yes, here's some feedback. No, okay, I'll move on, assuming that everything is okay. And so the developer, at Friday 4:45 p.m. is like, all right, I'm done with my development. I'm committing it, and ops, go do your stuff. And ops is like, seriously, on a Friday afternoon, and so the application goes to production, and then sure, of course, something goes wrong, and everybody has to work the whole weekend. So that's not really ideal, right? So we need a better process of doing that, because otherwise, of course, we have issues with releasing new features in our system. So again, if you were in the session yesterday, we talked more in depth about building pipelines with Tekton, and then also talked about GitOps. And so just a kind of a refresher, because we're going to build kind of on top of the GitOps concept today with progressive delivery. So GitOps, basically what it means is that it's your single source of truth. So Git is where you store your manifests, your deployment manifests, your configurations, maybe even your cluster definitions, and so everything is stored in Git, which means that you can see who made a change, when did they make a change, and what was changed. And with GitOps, the idea is that there's a GitOps engine such as Argo CD that's going to monitor changes, and then make sure that whatever you have in your Git matches with actually what's running in your cluster, right? So that's the whole idea of GitOps, where you have your single source of truth, your definition, so you see exactly what's going on in your cluster, and you can treat everything as code. So you can use peer reviews and merge requests and everything to deploy your applications, to have the configurations of your cluster and everything under control. So the downside of using, let's say, just GitOps is that typically you'll just have kind of a big bang release, right? So you're moving from one version to another. GitOps is really good with that. So yesterday in our application, we could see that we deployed a new feature and it rolled out nicely, right? So, new pods were created, and then the traffic was routed to the new pods, and the old pods were taken down. But I didn't really have control over exactly how to roll it out. And if I wanted to roll out to just a subset of users, that that wasn't part of the the feature set of just GitOps. So we need something else to be able to do that. So that's where progressive delivery comes in, as kind of a next step of doing CI/CD. So what is progressive delivery in addition to our CI/CD? So basically, with progressive delivery, we don't have a big bang release. We're going to do gradual rollouts of our new feature based on certain rules that we can create. So we're not doing, just from one version to the next version. We're doing it, kind of in a progressive way, which also means that, when you do a deployment, it does not necessarily mean a release, because you can deploy to production but not use it yet, right? So you still have your previous pods there running, and your traffic is actually running, pointing to the old release, the old pods, and then you're gonna, at some point, of course, you're gonna shift traffic to that new version, but that's under your control with progressive delivery. It also means that you're working a lot more with metrics to see how everything is progressing. So you can have feedback of, are there any issues happening? Are users running into specific errors? Or maybe, somebody has a specific user agent that we can use to test a new version, or, there's different ways of doing progressive delivery, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But mostly you want to look at metrics to see whether you want to roll it out further or not, right? And then also you want to release to a subset of users, typically with progressive delivery. So that's the whole idea with progressive delivery. So why would you want to do progressive delivery? Well, to decrease downtime, ideally, right? So if you have more control over how you're releasing, when you're releasing, and to what subset of users you're releasing to, you have less downtime. If there is an issue, it's only, potentially a subset or not even of your users. So it limits the tragedy of your release of, like, oh man, now we have, issues on production and how do we roll back and blah, blah, blah. So we have a lot less of that, which then allows us to deploy and release the production faster because we have more confidence in what we're releasing and how we're releasing, so we can do it more often, right? It's not, this big risk of, like, well, we're sending all our traffic to a new version. And it also means that, we have to do less mocking of our applications, so for the developers, if they have to test, if they can't test on production, they have to make some way of faking whatever is running in production. So typically like using mocks or something, or some sort of fake services. And so, so we can, yes, we should probably still do some mocking or doing some local testing as well. But sometimes it actually makes more sense to test on production. And so we'll see how we can do that. So some delivery techniques that we can use to accomplish progressive delivery are, well, the first is, a very typical deployment and isn't quite, progressive, but it's the classic blue-green deployment, right? So you have one service, your let's say your blue service that's running. You deploy your green service. You're not sending traffic to it yet. Then at some point you say, okay, now we're going to point our service to our new deployment. And now we're running our new version. So that's the blue-green deployment that you're probably aware of. Then canary deployments are more granular in the way that you're deploying. So you can say, I want to release to a subset, a small percentage of our user base. So it can be 1% or 10% or whatever you want to do. You will release to just a subset and then see how everything is going, and then you can increase the amount of your users that are using your new version if everything goes well, and then you can check and see if everything keeps going well. So canary releases give you, of course, more control over your releases. Then there's also dark launches where you're deploying your new version. And well, you're doing some sort of routing where in the case of traffic mirroring, you're actually kind of duplicating your traffic. So your traffic for the end user is still going to your first version, but you're also sending the exact same traffic. You're mirroring it to your new version. And so you can see how that's behaving under production load with real life requests. But the end user is not seeing any of that. They're being routed to your old version that presumably is working in a stable way. And so you can see how your new version is behaving under real load, but without it being actually being used. So that's traffic mirroring. Then you can also do like feature flags where you have a flag that says, hey, if this flag is true, then send traffic to this. And you can do kind of like dark canaries. You can use it based on a user agent or stuff like that. So that's also a way to use progressive delivery. And so basically it means that maybe don't don't tell your director, your boss, but you can use actually production as a testing environment to use as part of your your whole cycle of delivery. So I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of the testing pyramid, even though it does not look like a pyramid in my example here, but basically a testing pyramid shows like, well, you want to do most of your testing on your in your local environment, or in some sort of controlled environment where you're doing unit tests and component and do your code coverage and all that stuff. But actually, as part of your testing pyramid, you can use production as a testing environment where, thanks to those canary deployments, the dark canaries, the traffic mirroring. You can monitor what's happening in production with your application, and then even after release, of course. In our testing pyramid, we want to continue testing, which means that we want to do stuff like monitoring of our application. We could do, for example, things like chaos testing, where we're injecting certain faults, certain percentage, like a very small percentage, into our production cluster to see how it behaves if something goes wrong, and do that in a controlled way, so how to handle errors without like having big impacts when that error happens from an actual outage. So you've actually kind of already tested those scenarios, but in a smaller subset, in a smaller scale. So that's something that you want to do as well with testing. So yeah, cool. We can do progressive delivery. There's, sounds kind of cool, right? Traffic mirroring and routing your traffic in different ways. But so how do we actually accomplish this, in the real world? So, it's a lot easier with Kubernetes than not, right? Because with Kubernetes, we have the orchestration engine that allows us to route traffic and, to deploy certain replicas and all that. And so of course, we're in the KCD here, we're in the Kubernetes community days. So of course, we're going to talk about how to do it with Kubernetes, right? And so let's see how we do it. So just with Kubernetes, without any other tools, you can use some ways of doing those delivery models. So for sure, you can do blue-green deployments with Kubernetes. So for example, you have a service, you have a selector, basically, that points to a label, that matches to a label of a deployment. And then based on that, your service is pointing to one deployment, and then you can, at some point, update the labels to our new deployment and route traffic to our new version. So that's a way to do blue-green deployments with Kubernetes, and you don't necessarily need any additional tools. You can do canary releases with Kubernetes, but it kind of already becomes a little more tedious in my opinion. But so here's an example of how to do that. So you can do scale my deployment of my application 1 to 3 replicas, to 3 pods that are running, and then scale my second deployment to run with 1 replicas, and then point my service to both at the same time. So, based on that, some of the traffic will go to our first deployment in probably a round robin fashion, or however you have your, your HA proxy or whatever configured. And so you can do a canary release with Kubernetes. But the thing is, it's not really not very automated, right? So you can probably write some scripting around it or something to automate it, but it's not, super ideal to just do it with Kubernetes. So, a way to have more control over rollouts of services and of deployments in Kubernetes is using a service mesh. So a service mesh, for example, you can also use, let's say Knative. That's another alternative that you can use to route traffic. There's some other ones. But let's because I also mentioned in the title Istio, so let's use Istio as a way to control the traffic of our applications, and how we can use that to do releases and do our delivery in a more progressive way. So Istio and Service Mesh basically allow you to do more intelligent routing, load balancing of particular applications, of services in your cluster. So especially the ones that aren't exposed to the outside world, where you might, use some sort of load balancer or something. So here we're really, using services inside our cluster, where we can do some, like we can do canary releases with Istio. We can do dark launches. We can mirror traffic. You can actually use Istio as well to inject faults. So you can, tell you can configure Istio to say in 1% of all requests, insert, inject a 500 error, or inject, some sort of other configuration. And, with service mesh, typically you will also have, kind of some sort of observability and telemetry, and, encryption of your services to have mutual TLS and authorization and all that stuff too. But that's not what we're going to focus on for the rest of the session. We're going to focus on our progressive delivery, right? So the canary releases, the dark launches, that's the part that we're interested in today. And so, the architecture of Istio is basically, this kind of a lot going on in this slide, but you can see at the bottom left, you can see the control plane. So that's basically where you would define, your virtual services of Istio. And then for every pod that you're deploying, you'll actually inject a small proxy to communicate with the control plane. And so whatever you configure in your control plane will be communicated with your proxy, and the proxy will communicate back with your control plane. So that allows you to intercept network traffic of your pods, and that's how we're going to be able to do those different ways of using our traffic routing, right? So using a central control plane, so we don't have to configure it in each individual application or pod. So we have, a better way of controlling all that. So if we go back to doing canary releases, this time with Istio, you can see here you have a virtual service, which is a type of service that that Istio controls, which interacts with Kubernetes services. And you can see here that you have this route and you have a destination. And so we have destination for version 1, and you can see there's weight 75. And then for version 2, we have weight 25. And so basically weight equates to a percentage of traffic that you're routing to one of the two versions in this case. You could even have 3 versions, as long as it adds up to 100, you're good to go, So, but in this example, for example, we're sending our traffic, so 3/4 of our traffic to version 1 and 1/4 to version 2. So that's how you would do canary release with Istio. So you can also do traffic shadowing. So, like I was saying earlier, you want to mirror your traffic to your version 2, so you can see exactly how it behaves under a production load without the end user actually seeing it, because their traffic, what they're returning, what they're seeing returned from the service is coming from version 2. From version 1. So that's how you would define how to do traffic mirroring with a virtual service in Istio. And then you could do things like dark canaries, where, for example, you're only routing traffic for version 2 to a specific definition. So in this case, the user agent, the header of the request has to contain Alexandra in this case. So only Alexandra gets to test version 2, whereas everybody else is still, using version 1. So you can have, maybe your internal users test a new version, or, some sort of defined subset. But so, for now, what we're seeing, those virtual services with Istio are pretty cool, but you still have to, manually kind of change them, right? So if you set the weight to a specific number, then you still have to commit a new number to release to more of your traffic. So, what if we can automate this and have automated progressive delivery? And so that's where the project Argo Rollouts comes in really handy. So Argo Rollouts is kind of under that same family of that Argo CD is in, but it's not Argo CD. This is a different project under that same umbrella. And so with Argo Rollouts, what will happen is, so it'll typically work with Argo CD. Argo CD will detect the change and will say, hey, it needs to be rolled out. And Argo Rollouts is going to say, okay, but I'm going to control how we're going to roll out our feature. So what it can do is work with, for example, Istio, but it doesn't have to be Istio. It works with other projects as well, such as Traffic or Nginx, and a few more, to set the release, the rollout to, and control the weight of those virtual services. And then what it also can do is it can monitor the data that gets generated. So your telemetry, your metrics that your application is generating, so it can interact with Prometheus, or the other example here is Datadog, but it can be another project as well. We like Prometheus, of course, CNCF. But it can read the response from those metrics. You can define a certain analytics definition to see how everything is going, and then it can release based on that to control how the pods are being rolled out. So here you can see an Argo rollouts definition, a YAML, and you can see, so it has a spec strategy, and you can see canary with certain steps. And so those steps that you can see here in the example set specific weight, just like we saw in that Istio definition. And in this case, it sets the canary, so the new version, to 20% of the traffic. And then you see duration 1 minute. So for 1 minute, it's going to send traffic, 20% of the traffic. And if everything goes well, it'll pause for a certain amount of time. And then it'll set the weight, in this case, to 50%, and then wait another 2 minutes. And then so you can define, more steps to eventually roll out to everyone. So the thing is, right now with the definition that I have here, we're not looking at metrics in an automated way. So we'd have to actually go and look at, is the rollout going well, and then manually perhaps roll back, which is really easy to do with Argo rollouts. You can stop the rollout and you can abort it, and it'll automatically route traffic back to version 1. But what if we can make it, smart? What if we can do kind of what I call smart progressive delivery, where Argo rollouts is actually going to look at the metrics and then control our traffic. And so that's what's happening here. So we have, again, that same kind of YAML, but we're adding a piece. We're adding an analysis piece that's going to point to a specific template that's called success rate. And so if we look at this template, we can see, right, this is the template that matches with what we had defined in the rollout. And this is how we can define the success rate of what it needs to look for if during our rollout. So we can see that, the success rate means that every 10 seconds, we're going to check to see if our conditions are good, and then we're going to continue our rollout. Or if something goes wrong, in this case, if we have a failure limit of 2, so if we have more than 2 times that in the analytics, we see that our threshold is not, it has been exceeded of errors that are happening, then it'll roll back. So that's how it works. So in this case, with Prometheus, we can see here, a PromQL, where we look for specific response codes. So in this case, we're looking for 500 type errors happening in our metrics. And if in the last 30 seconds we have more than 5% of 500 errors, then we're going to roll back. And so that's what we're going to see in our demo. And so hopefully that'll go well. This is the demo requires a little bit of stable network, so we're going to see how it works. Okay, so hopefully you're with me here. So in this case, what my demo does here, I have on the right side just some bubbles that are floating around, and right now they're showing green bubbles. And so I'm going to do a rollout. And so here I have a definition of my application. So I have my rollouts, my Argo rollout definition here. So I hope this is big enough for you to see. I can make it a little bit bigger. So this is the same kind of rollout as I was showing in the slide. So we have an analysis piece, and then we have the wait here, right? So first we're going to roll out 30%. We're going to wait 20 seconds, and we're going to roll out to 40%, wait 10 seconds. then to 60, then to 80, and then to 100%. And then in our analysis template, you can see that, just like I was showing in the slides, it's looking for 500 errors. And so if we release a new version, so I'm just going to use customize to change an environment variable, but let's pretend that I'm deploying a new application. So I'm going to change it from green to blue. There we go. And git commit change to blue. And so we're going to change our bubbles from green to blue, but using the progressive delivery. So git push to push our new version, and then we have our application defined in Argo CD. And so if I just refresh, so we speed up Argo CD a little bit, it's going to say, hey, you're out of sync. We're going to roll out a new feature. And so here on the left, you can see we're actually going to this is a way to monitor our rollout with Argo rollout. So we're going to go back to our bubbles, and we're seeing green bubbles up, and we see some blue bubbles appearing. And here on our left side, and again, I hope this is big enough for you to see, you can see that there are 3 pods that are running. And now an analysis run is starting, and it's going to look for metrics to see, hey, if there are any errors, then we're not going to continue our rollout. But in this case, we're good, right? We see that every 10 seconds, it's doing an analysis run. It's going to look at Prometheus for metrics. And then if everything is going well, so it's gradually creating more pods and sending more and more traffic that you can see here. So set weight, we're at 80% right now of traffic. And so gradually, we're rolling out our new feature where we're seeing more and more of those bubbles turn blue until eventually now we've released our feature in, very fast, right? Because this is a live demo. In real life, we would probably do this a little more gradually, where we're waiting for more, traffic and metrics, and, do more gradual release. But in this case, we went really fast. And you can see there's a delay here to where it's waiting to then stop the previous pods and terminate them, which is happening right now. And so all those pods that were running the green version are now being terminated, and our traffic has been shifted completely to blue, and the old pods have been terminated. So that's what happened very quickly with a progressive release that was happening, where everything went well. So I have a few more minutes, so maybe I can show you what happens if things don't go well. So I have another image here that I can release that should create some errors. So let's see if this is going to happen. So I'm going to commit a bad image that I've pushed, let's say, with our new version. And we're going to say, let's just call it misbehave, git push. And let's go back to our application. So our blue bubbles are there. We're going to sync. Again, Argo CD is going to notice, hey, you are releasing a new feature. And so what happens if we misbehave, yellow bubbles are going to appear. And yellow bubbles are error bubbles. That's a random color that we chose. And so you can see here we have yellow bubbles that are returning errors. And now our analysis is going to start after a little bit of delay, because I've configured it that way. And so after, now we can see that our analysis run is running, and we got, some errors. So we see that red X. And so we have 2 times that the analysis is run and noticed errors. And we define it so it can't have more than 2 times that we run into a specific threshold of errors, which has happened right now. And so you can see that our status is degraded, and our traffic here has been automatically rolled back to our previous version. And you can see here on the right side, our bubbles are back to blue to our previous version. And so we have a delay here for a few seconds. And then after that, it's going to say, well, this release was no good. Let's tear down these pods, and let's I'll let you try again to do a better release. And so so then you can retry. So you can actually say Argo kubectl Argo rollout retry, and then it'll retry the rollout, which in this case, well, we know that it's not going to go well, right? Because the image just is bad. But we can retry and see again that some yellow bubbles are appearing, and then our analysis is going to run again, and then we're going to have the exact same problem, right? And so we'll let that happen for a second here. So we'd see our analysis running again, and we're going to have failures again. And it's again going to roll back to our previous version and point everything back to blue again. And so we'll let that happen. And then in the meantime, maybe we can go back to a good version. So we're going to do V1 and let's call it purple. Let's see if purple works. So git commit, and we're going to change it to purple, git push. So this is our new version that maybe we fixed. And so let's release this version. So we're going to refresh. We can see that, our health is degraded because our rollout didn't go well. And so we're rolling out one more time. So let's see if our purple bubbles are going to appear. And yep, I see a few purple bubbles appearing there. I hope you see them too. And we're going to run our analysis again. And so presumably this time there won't be errors. And let's see, analysis is running. Oh, and there are errors. So we'll see how that goes. We see more errors. So there might be a glitch in our traffic. Oh, no, this time we got a green check mark. So fortunately, we didn't pass our threshold, right? We needed to have more than 2 bad analysis runs. But actually, our analysis is going well right now. So maybe at the start of our release, I had a little network glitch or something that made some of the requests go bad. But now we can see that everything is going well. So we got 5 good analysis runs, and our traffic is routing to our purple bubbles, and everything is going well. And then at some point again, we can see that 100% of our traffic is going to our purple bubbles. So that's very quickly how you can use progressive delivery with CNCF projects like Istio and Argo CD and Argo Rollouts. So hopefully this was interesting to you. Some final notes. And I realize I'm running out of time, so I'll finish up very quickly here. I'll share the slides. So be careful of state, of course, if you're doing progressive delivery. Of course, if there are differences in your schemas and everything, be aware of that. Here are the links for the demos. If you want to play around with the Kubernetes, there's an OpenShift sandbox that you can use for free. That comes from our Red Hat developer program that I'm part of. So I like to advertise that. So you can sign up for free, developers.redhat.com/developer sandbox, and you get this free OpenShift sandbox to play around with. If you didn't get the link yesterday, if you weren't in the session, so my colleague Alex, who was in the session yesterday, wrote a book about GitOps, so you can download that for free with this link. And I'll post a link to the slides afterwards in the chat, so you can, hope, because I'm assuming that wasn't quick enough to scan the QR code, but that's all. So thank you for joining me in this session. And, if you have questions, maybe ping me. You can find me on Twitter, on Telegram, or whatever is your preferred way. So don't hesitate to ask those questions. And I'll share the slides so you can have, the way to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have questions? Any questions?
If there are any questions right now, if there's still time. In the meantime, I posted the deck on in the chat. So I'll stop sharing my slide in the meantime.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for the information you shared here. I have one question about, it is possible to implement this without having the Istio implementation, because Istio adds a lot of overhead into all services with that sidecar. It's possible?
Yep. Yeah. Yes. So you can use and on that Argo rollout slide that I was showing, so it showed Nginx, or you can use a few other projects. So if you go to the Argo rollouts website, you'll see all the different ways that you can use to to do your progressive delivery. Istio is nice because it has very fine-grained control over your rollouts, but you don't have to use Istio with Argo rollouts.
Also, I have one more question. Have you ever worked with Flagger?
With I didn't get the name.
With Flagger. It's under
okay.
the umbrella.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I'm aware of the project, but I don't know more about it than that, unfortunately.
Mostly because if you ever work with that tool, I was trying to ask you if you can tell us about some difference, but well, you haven't, so.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone? Thank you, Gary.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice rest of the
Thank
day.
you.
I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I would have loved to be there, but yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.